Welcome as we continue our study in Colossians in chapter 3, verse 21. Fathers, do not provoke your children that they may not be disheartened. Provoke is uh, sorry. Um, and that comes from eris, which is contention or quarrel, wrangling. It indicates some sort of strife between two people. And so Erythexo really means to stir them up to strife, to stir them up to quarrel or contention in some way. And then disheartened is a thumio, and that's the prefix a, which is a negative, without maybe. Um, it's used a few different ways, but generally as a prefix, you're gonna use the without, or in this instance, disheartened or dispassioned. Um, the root here is thumos, and so that is a general word for passion, but it's generally translated as wrath. Um, and in reference to us, it's always used in a bad way, like it's something we should put off. Does it mean that thumos is a bad thing? No, because it's also used of God's wrath. Um, and so when it's His wrath, it's good, but when it's ours, it's bad. And that should tell you something. So how can it be okay when He does it, but not when we do it? And it's because it's His job, not our job, right? It's His job to be the judge. And so who's forgiven and what's forgiven and what deeds are good and what deeds are bad. It's His job to discern that and to take care of that, not ours. And that's why when we do it, it's bad. Okay, so here though, it seems to be used as a negative thing to get rid of that. Well, and that's an example of how a word in itself, while it's important to understand the definition, it's also important to use that word in context and see how it's used throughout Scripture. Now, this word's only used one time, so we don't have that as an option, but we do have the context part. And so, verse 20 is talking about your kids learning, being obedient to that learning and engaged in it. And then verse 21 is saying, don't provoke your children so that they don't become dispassionate or disheartened. And so, what is it that they're disheartened or dispassionate about? It could be about learning, all right? It could be about God, and it could be about being your child. So, amongst a few other things. And that's the important part. Remember that, as I've said this in all of these verses, when it talks about our relationships with other people and how we're to react or how we're to act, um, that we're modeling a relationship with Christ, some part of a relationship with Christ. So here, as the Father, you're modeling the role of Christ uh, as He interacts with us as children. And so, just like in the previous verse, he was focused on the child's part of that of that role. It's a ministry thing, right? So, how does he interact with us? He's gentle. He does correct us if we need correcting, but he's always gentle. He encourages us. He gives us scripture, um, and we have a spirit to comfort us, um, not to provoke us, right? And so again, just focus on. It's always easier to interact with other people the right way when you remember um, why you're doing it. Right, you're focused on heaven and modeling the relationship that Christ has with you in some way.